Hi, everyone. Wow, that light is so bright. So I am going to have cue cards because I'm up here alone, and when left to my own devices, I do tend to stray a little bit. So I'm going to be looking at my cards. Please forgive me. My name is Amy Venier. I have been at Frameplay for 2 months, but I've been in games for a long, long time. And I want to thank you guys now because you're sitting through your third presentation on in-game. But I think that there's a different point of view to be offered. And I think even if you hear some of the same words that you just heard a couple minutes ago, I think that's okay. It means that everybody's paying attention. And I'm glad that everybody's paying attention. I don't know if anybody mentioned this before, I couldn't really hear, so forgive me if I'm repeating, but there was just recently a study released by Dentsu noting that gaming is the biggest white space media opportunity for brands right now. And and I'm going to be walking back and forth here, so just bear with me. But this is something that I've known for a very long time. As James mentioned, I have a very long background in video games. It started out so long ago in games media. My role has always been talking to and working with game publishers on the marketing of their own games. So yes, helping them market the game to sell the game, but also helping them market things like downloadable content or driving trailer views or distributing content, all with the goal of growing and maintaining their communities. And I think that that's a word that needs to resonate in this room today, because that's really what we're all doing here, is we're trying to reach and serve game communities. You're looking at a picture of my son. He was about 8 years old at this time. He's no longer 8, but and he had come to work with me that day. So I've had various jobs in the games industry where game consoles are prevalent and there's collectibles on people's desks. Right here, he's in the Geek and Sundry Twitch room, and he spent the day playing video games. And I think he was convinced at that time that that's all I did, that I came to work and I played games or I watched gaming content. But I have been watching my kids' own journey through gaming, from the Pixar games to Minecraft. They had a tiny little blip with Fortnite, all the way to Assassin's Creed. And that didn't just fuel my passion for the industry, but it's really helped shape my perspective on it as well. So I started in games advertising in the 90s. I started in games print and evolved that from print to digital to distributed content at companies like Machinima. And then prior to Frameplay, I worked on the launch and development of Google Stadia. So at Frameplay, I lead the team that works with publishers to bring content to our network. This is the content that you guys look to deliver ads into and reach your consumers. But really what this is doing for the publishers is this is helping them become a media company in their own right. For a very long time, there were media companies that sort of traded on the engagement and the enthusiasm around games. And game publishers are now thinking, well, why can't I do that myself? These are my customers. They can deliver ads sort of autonomously, and that's what in-game allows them to do. I chose this role because I do believe there's a way for brands and publishers to work together to bring real value to the player community. And I think that that's something that we should all be mindful of as we work to reach gamers. I will talk a little bit about the shared ecosystem between games and brands and why in-game advertising benefits studios, publishers, brands, and players. Switching cards. Sorry, there we go. Oh, sorry. 1 second. Okay. So Throughout my time in the games industry, one thing has remained constant, and that's the need and the desire of the publisher to differentiate their business model. So it wasn't that long ago, and I think I heard somebody mention it before, it wasn't that long ago when the opportunity for a game publisher to make money was to sell a game. It was a one-time event that needed to hit really big. In the early 2000s, and I think you guys have seen other timelines too as well, but in the early 2000s, there was the rise of downloadable content, and that gave them a second opportunity to sell to their customers. But today, games are moving more toward a service model. That's where games, they provide seasonal updates. Fortnite really blew this up and really kind of pushed the industry more in this direction versus those one-time downloads, but it opened it up to whole new opportunities for monetization. In the 2 months that I've been at Frameplay, I've talked to a lot of studios, and what they say is, so in-game is back? Because there was a lot of folks in the games industry who were around in 2005 and 2006 when they saw this first iteration. And if you think about what in-game was back then, I remember it very clearly. It was this sort of one-time, high-touch integration that lacked scale. It was very cool from an implementation standpoint. It was very novel, but it didn't scale. And if you think about the business model of what games were back then, that makes sense. But then came the massive growth in mobile gaming and the expansion of free-to-play as a viable business model. And that has really enabled what we know of as in-game advertising at scale today. So now that opportunity is there, but it's important to consider everything that makes in-game a part of a marketing strategy targeted to game communities. I will try not to jump ahead. There we go. No. There. Ooh, it's so touchy. So the work that we're doing now, there's a lot of work to do. It's focusing on positive, immersive, and rewarding experiences for players, for studios, and brands. And think about that. That takes a lot of work. Think about all of those intersecting interests. There's the goals of the advertiser, the goals of the publisher, and the desire and the frustrations and the needs of the games community. Intrinsic advertising, which is the concept that an ad can live natively, it won't disrupt, and organically in a game. It was started 15 years ago with companies like Massive. But those invasive and pop-up ads is really what has sort of turned off the games community. I think, I can't remember the stat, it's been years, but I think the gaming demographic is the #1 demographic to turn off pop-up ads. It was through an unintentional brand integration in PUBG that gave our Frameplay's founder the idea about what the right approach would be. And that's empowering developers to create unique brand integrations, because the developers are the ones that are creating those environments where almost 2.6 million people are, billion people, I'm sorry about that, worldwide are spending all of their time. Monetization of games is progressively harder. Think about how long it takes to provide seasonal updates, and then think about, from a consumer standpoint, all the times that they're asked to pay for something in order for that gameplay to be rewarding. Studios are really, really mindful of this. Players don't want to be charged over and over, and that's where immersive advertising, having it be natural and integrated, is really what is needed to bring the equilibrium. With it, the studios can then focus on their lifetime value for their players while enhancing creative flexibility. And the game community's needs and frustrations change with each new platform, each new device. To us, it's really cool and it's really fun to talk about the next marketing innovation, but think about that from a consumer standpoint. Think about how confusing and frustrating that can be. So this growing and diversifying market means that we need to be aware and honor all of the players, the community's needs. Just one, there. It's a very touchy controller. So there's always been this shared ecosystem between games and brands. It's always been there. I think we're going to hear from Activision, and there's some of these publishers have had very healthy direct relationships with brands for years. This is nothing new. You know, when there's an endemic connection between a consumer product and a game, you know, nothing's better, right? It's a collaborative relationship that benefits both businesses. And in-game advertising does create that deeper value exchange. And because everyone in this room is focused not just on reaching players, but also doing it at scale and being able to measure that, that's important to emphasize Frameplay's ability to do just that. And I know that measurability is one of the words, sorry. Oh my goodness, sorry you guys, you're ready to kill me, I know. There we go, okay. Measurability, I was hearing the words immersive, engaged, you know, that these are all words that all three of us are talking about, but there's a reason for that. So what does, one second. So measurability is very rewarding when you have the audience's attention, and that's why it's so exciting for in-game, because we have both the attention and the ability to measure that attention. To be there when the player is engaged in a medium they opted into and that they didn't land on unintentionally, and in ways maybe neither the publisher or the advertiser ever thought of. Gameplay is a perfect example of that leaned-in experience, especially on personal screens, where that becomes their sole focus. When I was working on the development of Google Stadia, we saw some really interesting UX research that showed kids will give up high def graphics for the ability to take the game with them. Fortnite and the Switch absolutely push that consumer behavior forward. But if you think about the personal screen, and I say personal screen, not mobile, because there's very different things, right? There's mobile gaming, and then there's gaming on a personal screen. The personal screen can be anything that you're holding in front of you and don't have a shared viewing experience. So they're really, really focused on what they're doing, and then that type of attention where the content is intentionally weaved in, really just without disrupting, creates that brand affinity. The game only plays when they're being interacted with, and the player completely controls the narrative. So that's what we're committed to in valuing a gamer's focus and attention, and that's why it matters to the player communities. One more. No. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Okay, I think this is it. Yep, okay. And what does good game advertising look like? I didn't switch before. There, okay, what does good game advertising look like? So interstitial ads, I know that this has been an industry norm for a long time. That really has been the thing that has put a lot of game players off of in-game, because they think about an ad popping up, pulling them out of the game and requiring their attention. So when you think about intrinsic native ads, they're placed when the game is being, wherever they're being played, actually in the gameplay, but native to the environment. We spend time with both the brand and the studio to help them envision what that can look like. And we often imagine integrations that neither the brand or the publisher had thought of. So it's this very collaborative sort of three-way partnership. Players also appreciate in-game ads that provide realism to the game. But this doesn't mean repurposing TV creative. Really thinking about creative should support intrinsic formats. Oh, yes. It moves without me touching it. Yep. So before now, in-game advertising was hard-coded. It required really long lead times. We've amassed an ecosystem of games with the mission to offer consistent, scalable option for the advertising community, which is also highly measurable and has nothing to do with browsers and cookies. There's in-game viewability, brand lift, and post-impression attribution. We know where the ad is placed and the perspective of the player at any given time. And our telemetry engine assesses the ad ratio, the skew, and the obstruction from the perspective of the player. And when the ad is considered viewable, the clock for our time in view counter will start, and then it pauses when there's an obstruction. We've analyzed the total amount of time that the ads are in view throughout the campaign, and the average amount of time that each ad and campaign is in view per player session. And similarly, I heard Anzu mention this as well, we have also worked with Lumen and iSquare to compare our time in view calculator with their respective eye tracking, and we've all agreed that this is a very viable measurement of attention with in-game. Oh my goodness. The slides they're moving without me touching it, so. Intrinsic in-game advertising does provide significant scale and high-quality cinematic environments. We have the in-game viewability technology that can measure when they see the ads, and we have proven brand lift and attribution data to solve for the amplification effect for cross-channel exposure. Okay. And as I wrap up with 3 minutes left, I just want to leave you with 3 key takeaways, because I know that when we all come up here and we talk about this stuff, there's you'll walk away and you'll remember 1 or 2 things. You might remember how bad I was with the clicker here. But number 1, that in-game is reimagined and it offers both brand and scale. The number 2 is that studios are leaning in and they're offering more collaboration with games and brands. I think being mindful of what their business goals are for getting into this space is important for us to be mindful of as marketers. And that Frame-Play's number 3 is that Frame-Play's DNA is about supporting all of these ecosystems, the player, the brand, and the studio. I think that as gaming communities continue to grow, because you can no longer say that there's one gaming community, there are thousands of gaming communities. And they become much more diverse and a little bit harder to talk about as one collective demographic. And so when we think about in-game advertising, we really do want to think about how to be there and add value and not disrupt the thing that they're there to do. Okay, well, no. All right. So this brings me back to where I started and why I'm in this business. I really do want to make this a healthier business. I want the games industry to be sustainable. But I also don't want my kids constantly asking me to buy in-game items or spending all of their own money on it. And this is what in-game advertising allows for. It allows for the games industry to grow and be robust. It allows for you guys to reach these super engaged, sort of hard to talk to demographics. But the business of games, as I've seen it through my now 16-year-old's eyes, he's open to it, but only if it's being done right. It should be rewarding, competitive, and escapist, and all predicated on a healthy business model that advertising will significantly contribute to. That's it.
Hey, thank you, Amy. That's got a mind of its own.
Oh my goodness, have you ever seen it?
We'll take it out and destroy it in the break. Look, while I've got you, you mentioned Google Stadia there. They've announced that they're going to close that down as of January next year. Surely it doesn't mean, when we're talking about how amazing the opportunity is, I can't believe for a minute that Google will be out of gaming entirely. But what does it kind of mean for cloud gaming, do you think?
Yeah, so when I mentioned, I showed the timeline and I talked about, these technical advances and leaps at the games industry. The games industry is always first to do these things. Cloud gaming was around about 10 or 12 years ago with a couple of iterations that people immediately wrote off. And then I think Stadia put a really big foot out there. And I will say this, though. When people ask, did I think it was successful? I think it really did change the perception of what cloud gaming can be. And I drew a lot of parallels. So Google is not going to just trash this technology. It will come back up, and it will be something bigger and better, not a game platform like we all saw. I do think that because the games industry is so, bullish on technological advances, it's why in-game in 2005 was just ahead of its time. It really needed the business model to evolve and catch up to what the opportunity was. So I make a lot of comparisons between cloud and in-game. It's all very similar.
Watch this space.